Good morning and good afternoon to those watching online from other parts of the world, or possibly good night. My name is Elisabeth Braw. I'm a senior fellow here at AEI, and I focus on gray zone aggression, meaning the sort of aggression that takes place below the threshold of armed violence, which unfortunately is has been becoming and is becoming more busy still. I wish it would diminish to the point that I would be out of work, but that's not likely to happen. And a lot of that sort of aggression has been directed against Lithuania lately. But I'll start on a more positive note and talking about armed violence and gray zone aggression, which is I want to introduce Lithuania's finance minister, Gintarė Skaistė, who is so incredibly accomplished. I feel like a failure here myself reading her bio, but I will read it nevertheless. Minister Skyster has a PhD in social sciences. She's an economist, and I just learned that her PhD was an investigation of venture capital worldwide, the culture of venture capital, how venture capital behaves in different countries. And I think I'm correct in summarizing by saying that it behaves very differently depending on which country the VCs operate in. Minister Skyster graduated from Kaunas University of Technology in 2010 in economics, and she, as I mentioned, has a PhD in social sciences and also a master's degree in economics. In December 2020, she was appointed Minister of Finance. She has been a member of parliament since 2016, and before that, for 10 years, she was a city councillor in the city of Kaunas. She's a member of the Homeland Union, and I also found out that in this time she also raised 2 children, which makes me feel even more insufficient. But maybe the redeeming, for me, the redeeming factor is that now she has to tackle endless problems, whereas I just get to sit and observe them. And that's what we want to talk about today, because Lithuania, like other countries, was struck by COVID-19 and the economy suffered as a result. But it didn't end there because then just as Lithuania was beginning to recover, the government took the courageous step of allowing Taiwan to open a representative office in Vilnius, and that was the first such representative office to have opened in many years. In fact, a number of countries that maintain some sort of relations with Taiwan has been decreasing due to Chinese pressure, but Lithuania took this courageous step and was punished by China as a result of that, and it found, not just Lithuania found, the European Commission found that all of a sudden Lithuanian imports were stuck at Chinese ports, and Lithuanian imports meaning all imports containing Lithuanian goods, which is a lot of imports because Lithuanian companies export components to various companies around the world, especially within the European Union. Now, in the meantime, the European Commission has taken this case to the World Trade Organization, where it's sitting at the moment. But the moment the European Commission brought this case to the WTO, China just stopped importing Lithuanian beer, beef, and dairy. So I don't think China is in any sort of mind or mood to follow any WTO ruling on that first case of industrial goods with Lithuanian components. So it is a very difficult situation for Lithuania, which has been compounded by the fact that there is now a war in Ukraine, which has affected the Lithuanian economy greatly, both as it relates to Russia and as it relates to Ukraine and as it relates to the general situation in the region. So I have to say, Minister, I don't envy you, but I hope you can give us maybe a more upbeat perspective, or maybe what I should ask for is your assessment of the situation, maybe a little bit about how you're looking at the future, and then we'll have a discussion. And feel free already to send your questions to the AEI address that you're seeing, hopefully online, and obviously here in the room. Feel free to think of your questions. And with that, over to you.
Thank you very much. It was really nice to hear you talking about me. It's a bit funny, but yeah, thank you very much. Really, I'm visiting Washington at the same time, not just sitting here, but also participated in the spring meetings of IMF and World Bank. And definitely the main discussions are on the topic of the war, Russia's war in Ukraine, and everybody wants to help Ukraine and discussing how to do that in the best way we can. And at the same time, there are some discussions about additional sanctions on Russia as well. So if to talk about Ukraine and how we can help, there is some different, I may say, fields where we can help. There is a short term, just measures to help this government to survive these 3 or 4 months until the war will be over. We expect so, because the government is operating, and it's quite a bit different from the other wars which might be held elsewhere. So we have to help this government to pay pensions, to pay salaries, and to operate normally, and to reopen their economy at the same time, because at the half of the country, the war is not going in the western part of Ukraine. So we are trying to revive their agriculture, to open their industry. And I think it's really important to help this country to continue. And at the same time, there are additional measures discussed about the longer term, how to help Ukraine to reconstruct Ukraine after the war, because it's really big damage is done there and destroyed many bridges, many roads and everything, schools. So it's an enormous amount of money, and really I think the world have to help Ukraine, because it's unjustified, unprovoked war, and they are not in the really good position to reconstruct the country themselves. So really main discussions are on this topic. And also a bit of the sanctions, because definitely the Western allies, the US and of the G7 countries, and also European Union wants to like to stop with the war, maybe to push a bit Putin to discuss about the peace with Ukraine's with some sort of sanctions. And at the same time, I think sanctions also have to impacts short term and longer term, because if we're talking about the short term measures, it would be the push to discuss about the peace. And if to talk about a longer term sanction impact, I think it's the main issue is to like to weaken Russia's economy, that we will not be able to reinforce their army after the situation will be over. So they will not be able to buy more tanks, not will be able to buy more missiles, and not to support their army as they are doing now. So I think it's really important to have these decisions, just because Russia has this empirical ambitions, and sometimes we as a Lithuania were talking many years about that, because we really know how Russia is operating. But at the same time, some Western European countries didn't listen to us, because they were thought that we're too
paranoid.
Yeah, too paranoid. But at the same time, now we see that we were right, and now already we're hearing the other countries of European Union, like Austrian minister said that yes, you were right and we were wrong, and now everybody's listening, Lithuanians, but it's for Ukrainian it's a bit too late.
It's a sad victory. It's sad to have been proven right on this point, but
Yeah. And I think really the war will have an impact on the economy, and especially for the countries which are neighboring to Ukraine. Lithuania is not neighboring country. We have the Belarus in between us, but definitely Belarus is like a bit of the younger sister of Russia. So I would say it's quite the same to have them there. And really the impact is from, I would say, from some sides. One of them is refugees, war refugees that are coming from Ukraine. So in the neighboring countries, there is about 4, 5, 6% of the total population already from war refugees, and you have to spend a lot of funds to support them. In Lithuania, we have about 46,000. It's about 2% of our total population. So the numbers are big, and really we have to have additional amendments to the budget to support them being with us. And also the other impact that we do have is on inflation. And inflation is coming from, especially from the energy prices. And I think energy prices increased last year already because of intentional acts of Russia not to give enough gas, not enough oil, and that's why the prices come up. And we expected them to go down in the beginning of this year, but when the invasion happened, everybody understood that the prices will persist for the longer period of time, and now to say when it will end is really difficult because uncertainty is very big. And at the same time, the prices of food increased, and I think they will stay higher for the longer period of time. And partly it's also because of the war, because Ukraine and Russia is producing much of the food and also other things that really is important to that market. So we just see that the inflation will persist for the longer period of time. And I would say that it's a war situation is already, like you mentioned, it's already not the first crisis in the recent times, and it's really sometimes difficult to say what might happen more and what to expect more, because there was a COVID situation, and I would say that Lithuania came out of this crisis pretty much better than the other countries, because our economy didn't drop at all. We did have a big package for supporting our economy, and we went out from it quite well. Also afterwards, it was Belarus crisis, because it was a really local one, because Belarus regime just decided to bring illegal migrants from Eastern Middle East and just push them to the border of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and just there quite a number of them is still there. And thousands of them came already to Lithuania. So it was also like one of the moments of uncertainty in Lithuania. Then was China and our decision to open the Taiwanese representative office, and the intentional acts of China to ban our exports from Lithuania to China. And also there was some intentions to have an impact on the companies that are importing goods from China, and also all the companies that are producing some components for the other supply chains that are bringing their goods to China. So after that, we have the war situation. We have very high energy prices, like in the whole Europe, and at the same time, we are trying to deal with that with like a more broad scope of measures, because it's not only the current energy prices, but at the same time, it's an energy independence question, because Russia is using their energy goods as a weapon, as a threat to the European countries. And I think Lithuania, as knowing Russia best of us, so just took the measures from 2010 already, when decided to buy LNG terminal. and making the pipelines and the grid with the other parts of Europe, like with Poland, with Nordic countries, to have the independence to buy our gas from whatever the world, but not from Russia. And now we're the first country to decide not to buy Russian gas, and I think it's really leading by example and showing to other European Union member states that it's really possible to do that. But you have to have a plan and you have to follow it. And also we're putting a lot of emphasis on renewables, and we're trying to have at 2030 already 93% of our electricity from renewables. And I think it also will help not just to lower the prices, to have more stable market, but at the same time to have the energy independence from the Russian side. So I think all these measures make my life very interesting, but at the same time, I'm just expecting that no more surprises will happen.
No more crises, and let's hope there isn't a global economic recession. I understand there are a lot of people watching online, so I would just encourage those watching online to submit their questions, which I will see here on the iPad. The migration, the weaponization of migration in late 2021 was really a formidable example of grey zone aggression used against Lithuania and Latvia and Poland. And I think the Belarusians operated on the assumption that you wouldn't know what to do, but all three countries were quite firm in trying to halt or stem the inflow of migrants. Did it have any effect on your economy, this sustained border crisis?
Definitely, it had impact on our budget expenses, because really now we're building the physical barrier at the border with Belarus, and without the situation I wouldn't do that because it's a really costly decision. At the same time, we're making cameras at the border. There is people guarding the border, and it's quite a good amount of money. Yeah.
And we should remember just how this came to pass. I think it was not just I think, it was clearly a revenge action by President Lukashenko against Lithuania in particular, after Lithuania complained about the famous Ryanair flight containing a Belarusian dissident or opposition journalist being diverted to the Minsk airport, where he was detained, a flight bound for Vilnius, and Lithuania then rightly complained and made the case that this was aviation piracy, and President Lukashenko took revenge by launching this really unsavory attempt at destabilizing Lithuania, but also Latvia, Poland, and the European Union, which ultimately failed. I wanted to ask you as well about the energy transition, and by the way, those in the room obviously feel free to think of or ask your questions as well. But energy transition, you said, it was reported a couple of weeks ago that Lithuania has become the first country to make itself independent of, or to stop importing Russian gas. And you said you have to have a plan. What was the Lithuanian plan, and when did you think up the plan, and when was it put into action?
We have a strategy for our energy independence, and part of it is a decision in 2010, which was made in 2010 after the financial crisis, which was very difficult times, and the decision was made to buy LNG terminal to bring the liquid gas from the other parts of the world. So now we're getting the gas from United States, from Norway, from Qatar, but not from Russia anymore, and it's really nice decision for us. But also there were another decisions as well, because it's not only gas, it's also electricity grid, it's oil decisions, and at the current period, I would say we are independent from Russia, because now we're using from electricity just for technical reasons to have safety of the grid about 10% of our total electricity. And if the Russians would cut electricity for us, it doesn't matter. We will survive. We just have another safety measures. So buying from Russia electricity is not something that we wouldn't live without. So at the same time, we made the connections with other parts of Europe to have to be integrated more, not in the post-Soviet region, but with the Western European countries. And I think in a very short period, we will be able to cut the Braw and so will be connected to the other part of Europe and will be even more secure than we are now. And with the gas, the same. We're making connections with Poland, with the Nordics, to be more integrated in this part. And now we are able not just to use this LNG for Lithuania, but at the same time we can share it with other countries that are neighboring us. And I think it's really helpful to be independent not only for Lithuania but also for the region that we are operating in. And if talk about oil, yes, we have the companies in Lithuania that are using Russian oil, but at the same time they're making decisions how to say goodbye and not to use it anymore. So I think at a very short period of time we will just won't using any of Russian energy goods.
So it is possible.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to have another decisions, because definitely the prices depends on the international markets. So we have to make the decisions together with the European Union, other member states about renewables, and to be independent from Russian or not Russian gas already. And renewables is the way for us. So we're putting a lot of emphasis not only on renewables, but also on the energy efficiency, not to use as lot energy as we're using now.
Yes, that's killing two birds with one stone. Renewables are clearly the answer, not just to Russian aggression, but to the climate change crisis that we are facing. I wanted to ask you about the suspended Lithuanian exports to China. So all of a sudden, Lithuanian companies discovered that their exports to China were stuck at Chinese ports, and not through any fault of their own, but as a Chinese retaliation against the Lithuanian government. What sort of effect is that having on the Lithuanian economy?
I would say there could be three different impacts. So one of them is a direct impact of banning exports from Lithuania. Another one, banning imports from China to Lithuania, because it's raw materials that are coming from there to our industry companies. And the third one would be impact on a secondary effect impact. If you're just saying to the companies that are bringing cars from Germany that if they're using parts made in Lithuania, you will not bring cars to China. So it would be secondary effect. So if talk about the first one, about banning our exports to China, so yes, the numbers lowered to zero, and they're not allowing anything from Lithuania go to China. But looking at the...
And can I interrupt? And China was a big export market for many of these companies originally, so it went from quite significant numbers to zero.
It was really an impact for some certain companies. Looking at the bigger picture for Lithuania as a whole, it was not big numbers, because we were exporting to China about 1% of our total exports. But for certain companies, yes, it was really important, because they were exporting biggest part from their all goods just to China. And yes, it was harmful for some companies, really. So if talking about the secondary effect about banning imports from China, really at the first days it was quite difficult to get something from China, like raw materials. But looking at the numbers, the whole numbers in our economy, now we see that the numbers of imports from China, they are not lowering. So I don't know if it's changing what companies are bringing from China, or nothing changes. I do not have the exact numbers, but the big numbers, the big data, they are not changing. So it means that China is allowing to export their goods to Lithuania, and it was quite surprising for me to understand. And the third one, the secondary effect and pushing the companies not to buy parts from Lithuanian companies, it was really felt in the first days, but afterwards we have really asking for help, I would say so, from the Western allies, from United States, from European Union member states, just to say that the rules are the rules and everybody has to live with them if they want to live in a democratic society. And if there is a World Trade Organization, you have to respect the rules that there are. So we had a claim or case in the World Trade Organization, and the other countries of G7 supported us in this case. And what we're seeing now, that companies are staying in Lithuania and they are not changing their mind about the expanding and having additional workers. So it might seem that situation calmed a bit, but it's really a great uncertainty still.
Yeah, and all of this makes Lithuania a test case, or a sort of a canary in the coal mine when it comes to countries wishing to exploit globalization to make a geopolitical point, which is really what happened to Lithuania. And it's interesting what you're saying, that China banned exports to Lithuania, but something is coming into the country. So they may have concluded that it wasn't having an effect, so they'll start exporting again. But it's very murky, and I think we all have, every country should learn from Lithuania's case in this example, because Lithuania's experience in this case, because what it indicates, or what it demonstrates, is that the decision of a government, any decision by a government that displeases another government, can prompt that government to retaliate against companies that have absolutely nothing to do with that decision, and they are defenseless. So it is a really alarming situation, and a challenge here to those here. There are many more people online than are in the room, but nevertheless, I will challenge you to ask questions so that you get some in, and as many as the people online, and their questions are already coming in. And before I ask my next question, I'll ask the first one here from those on the people joining us online, and that is, are there labor shortages in Lithuania that some of the Ukrainian immigrants can help fill?
Definitely, they're affecting the labor market in Lithuania, but the most of refugees that are coming from Ukraine, these are women and children, and many times there's women with many children, and sometimes it is not possible for them to work just because they have to care of their children at the same time. So we see that there are increasing numbers of refugees that are working, and I think it's good, because we had some previous the situation. We have shortages that some employers were saying that it's not enough workers for them. So it's a bit of the helpful situation when the people are coming and they're having the labor force more in the situation. So I do not see that it would be some sort of harmful for our economy, and we are really trying to do our best in helping them to wait until the war will be over.
And you have also received quite a large number of Belarusians. Can you tell us how that has gone financially and work-wise? Are any of them? I assume many of them will stay in Lithuania for a longer period, considering that the regime will remain, looks likely to remain in place in Minsk for the time being. How has that gone
yes,
so far?
after the so-called elections in Belarus, when the Lukashenko won some sort of this election, many Belarusians came to Lithuania, and many of them is IT workers who can work whatever, from Lithuania, from Poland, from Spain, whatever. But they're staying, many of them are staying in Vilnius, and I think they're quite good integrated in our society. Also, there are some workers with a lower qualification, I would say, and we have many drivers, many workers in the service industry. So they're good. They integrated really well in our society, and now they're just forming in some segments. They are forming quite a big part of the work. It's in the constructions, in the driving and transport logistics sectors as well.
The story of the Belarusian IT sector, I think, is so fascinating. The fact that Lithuania and Poland as well have made it easy for Belarusians to come to your countries. And as I understand, especially Belarusian IT experts, and Belarus is, of course, well known as a center of IT. Not so much innovation as practice, and really sort of a Silicon Valley of its region in Minsk. And now those workers are leaving, and that's going to affect the Belarusian economy, and I would submit help the Polish economy and the Lithuanian economy. So there's a lesson learned for authoritarian rulers in all kinds of countries. Your experts will vote with their feet, even if they can't vote properly at the ballot box. Let's see if there are any two questions in. Let's start with you and then you. Oh, right.
Thank you. I was hoping the minister might be able to comment on two questions I have.
And feel free to introduce yourself if you like.
Yeah, my name is Saul Anusis from Washington. My question is, there's been almost unanimous universal condemnation of what Russia has done, and many have now called it genocide. And Lithuania has led on the issue. Oh, wrong slide. Sorry about that. My two questions. One is that there's been universal condemnation of what Russia has done, and many have called it genocide. Lithuania has actually led on the issue of making the case that what Russia is doing in Ukraine is genocide. And I wonder if you could comment on how that is going and the reaction that you're getting with other European countries. And then number two, because of the public opinion, and as well maybe even almost unanimous condemnation of what Russia has done, has that united Europe? Are there challenges, or what kind of challenges do we have with some of the politicians, say in Germany and other Eastern European countries, that aren't as supportive because of their ties to Russia? And how is that working in uniting kind of Europe to understand the Russian threat? Thank you.
I would say that the situation in Europe and in the other parts of the world is quite different, because if the European Union member state supports Ukraine, I would say unanimously, when we're talking about the other parts of the world, the world is big, and not only Europe and United States. So there are some countries with a quite different opinions. And when you want to have a condemnation in United Nations, or now we are visiting IMF and World Bank, and we have discussions about the communique, when we wanted to say that what's happening in Ukraine is Russia's war against Ukraine. And there are some countries banning this communique just because of that. And we have no communique at this time. Mm. So to say that it's unanimously, it's not so much. So I think what the war done to European nations, that yes, it united us pretty much. And I think that's really understanding in European Union member states that if not to stop Russia there might be another war in Europe, and we have to stop it in doing pretty much, not less. And there are discussions about the sanctions as well, and the differences is maybe depends on the dependence of exact country on where it is and how it is connected to the gas pipelines and so on. But at the same time, there is discussions which sanctions would be more harmful to Russia and not to ourselves, and how to make these decisions in the case that it will not just rise the prices and increase revenues for Russia. If we're banning just plainly, it might happen that the prices will rise and Russia's budget just will get more revenues. So how to construct the sanctions in that way that it would be more harmful for Russia, to lower the revenues for Russia, it's the case for discussion. But I really hope that there will be Russian energy goods included in the next sanctions package as well. In what form, we will see, but there are definitely discussions about energy as well in the current period of time.
Can I, before I bring you in, can you just maybe expand briefly on the points you made about there being no communique because some countries are objecting to the use of the word war when it comes to the war in Ukraine? That I think that is it's a remarkable state of affairs that some countries feel so beholden to Russia that they would object to using the word war.
Yeah, it was discussions in both institutions, in the World Bank and also in the International Monetary Fund about the communique in one and another institution, and we try to use the wording that United Nations is using, Russia's war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And Russia was the first one to say no to that type of wording, but at the same time, there were many countries that wanted to have some sort of compromise, to say maybe crisis in Ukraine or something like that. So we just decided to have no communique at all, than to have some washed up wording, and
yeah.
I think it would not really good in the situation.
Yeah. Okay, over to you.
Thank you, Minister. I'm Wes Colt from CSPC here in DC. My first question, or my only question, relates to the beginning of your remarks when you were discussing how Lithuania can support the functioning of Ukraine's government and its post-war recovery. And I was wondering if there's anything off the top of your mind that the United States can do, or you wish we were doing, to assist your government in that and assist other European governments in that.
I think there is some sort of decisions that are already made, and if we're helping for Ukraine, and I would say in the three fields. One of them is military. We're giving them weapons to fight with Russia, and I think United States is helping in that case to give weapons to Ukraine in different ways. Another way is helping refugees that are in our member states, in the border countries, and as well as in Lithuanian cases a bit further, but at the same time they are coming. So in that case, we just expect a bit more support from the, I would say, European Union in that case. And the third field is financial support, which is constructed by the different financial institutions, in this case, International Monetary Fund and World Bank. And I know that the United States is participating in this, in constructing this financial instruments in quite big numbers. So I would say it's really nice to see such a support in this case. But definitely we will see how the war will go on and when it will be over. So I think it might be not the last decision made in this case, because it's a short-term decisions about supporting the existing government, but at the same time we will have discussions about the reconstruction of Ukraine, and in that case it might be needed very big numbers to help Ukraine to get on their feet. So I think at the current period, I would say it's quite good what the United States is doing, but we're looking at the future, and I would ask everybody to do everything what they can.
And on that note, whenever the war ends, as you say, there will be just an enormous need for reconstruction funds for Ukraine. And do you have, what are your thoughts on who should pay for it, apart from the US government, which will inevitably part with some money, but it's got to be a massive, it's going to be a massive undertaking. Should we expect Russia to pay for some of it?
I would say there is a possibility, because there are some funds freezed in the different countries, but with the current legal framework, we cannot just take it and give it to Ukraine. And if there will be some decisions globally, I think it could be used for reconstruction of Ukraine, because really the aggressor should pay for what they are doing. But I would say that it's really economically wise to help Ukraine, because what's happening in Ukraine, because it's really advanced economy. It's not just the war in some local community, just a big country with a really big impact on the global economy. And if you're not helping Ukraine, you're just damaging yourself, because it's really integrated in our supply chains, especially in a food production. So if not helping Ukraine to open their ports, to have their agriculture, so the countries like Egypt will definitely be affected. So it's a really integrated country into the whole economic picture. So to help Ukraine is it's in our own benefit.
Oh, it certainly is, and yes, it's already having an effect on the drop in Ukrainian and Russian, but mostly Ukrainian grain exports is already having an effect, not just on us here in the West, but as you said, on countries like Egypt as well. And I think we're clearly seeing the beginning of uprisings in the Middle East, uprisings to protest the rising cost of bread. Well, that is nobody's fault except the country that's behind this war, but we can't, it doesn't seem like we can change Russia's thinking, but it's something to bear in mind that this is not just about Ukraine. If this war continues, the Middle East will be destabilized, and of course other economies in the area around Ukraine will be destabilized, not to as significant a degree as what we're likely to see in the Middle East around food protests, but nevertheless it has all kinds of wider implications. I want to ask you another question here about energy. Since alternative energy sources can take time, up to decades, to develop and implement on a wide scale, how will Lithuania manage its energy needs in the meantime? And how has Lithuania prepared itself for cutting off Russian gas imports? I think that's a really crucial point. How did you manage to reduce dependency to the point that now you could cut it off?
I think if you want to do something, you have to have a good plan and just to follow the plan. So we just, I think in 2010, just decided what the plan is and how to lower this dependency. And we just ordered the LNG, and in 2014, the LNG came to our Klaipėda port. And now we are able to bring the gas from the other parts of the world, and I think that's the case that other European countries will do in a quite short period of time. And at the same time, we have made the connections with other countries, not only with Russia, because previous these decisions, we paid for the gas from Gazprom 30% higher prices than for the other European countries, just because Russia is using their gas as a weapon, as a threat, as an object of discussions. So now we're having the possibility not to talk about it with Russia at all, and it's really a nice thing to do.
So they were charging the 30% extra just to be difficult, or just because they were able to do it because you didn't have an alternative?
Another choice. Yes.
Yeah.
We just have pipeline from Russia, and that's it. Now we have pipelines with other countries, also LNG, and now we are able to choose and to have an alternative, and it's really important. I would say that's not only just economic energy independence, but also it's an economically wise decision because we're just paying less than it was previously.
And the question about renewables, which are the answer to so many questions, but nevertheless they take time to develop, as the audience participant mentioned here. So how is Lithuania managing its energy needs while you're progressing to the point where you have a lot more renewables, or use a lot more renewables?
No, we have also importing electricity from the other countries as well. So at the same time, we are producing with the plans that we do have. What we have a plan in 2030 to have 93% from renewables and to be completely independent from what's happening elsewhere. And I think really a very important project in this case is offshore wind that we will have in the Baltic Sea, about 30 kilometers from our shore. And it will be definitely a very, very big project. And we are now putting like a base for it in this year, because now we are exploring the ground under the sea, and we'll see where it might be constructed, and we'll expect about in 2027 to have the first ones and to finish the project until 2030.
Well, you heard it here first, 93% renewables by 2030. That's fantastic. I wanted to ask you as well about Rail Baltica, which is, I think, a fantastic project, but one that isn't widely known. So it's a rail link that's planned by the three Baltic countries, and will connect all three countries. Where is that project now, and when can we expect to take the train between the three countries? And what are the benefits also?
Definitely there will be benefits, because you can go with a train from Warsaw to Tallinn at the same day. But it's really a very big project, and there are big parts of it because it's split it in many small projects at the same time, and it really needs a lot of funds. So European Union is helping, and there are quite a lot of different instruments to fund this project. But it's really so big that I think there is still not the very clear view about when it will end. So it's still on the discussions at the same time where to find additional funds to finish it. Yes, but we are planning, and we have now projecting like also some sort of very local decisions how to implement this project. So it's really split it in some parts, and some of them are more advanced, and others are not so much. So it's really long way to go far.
Yeah. It would have so many benefits, I think, not just for us ordinary travelers, but also for military mobility and the ability for the opportunity that it would give NATO forces to transport equipment and transport equipment efficiently all the way up all the way up and down between all the way from Tallinn to all the way from Estonia, I should say, not just Tallinn, but all the way from Estonia to Poland and vice versa. I wanted to see if there are any other questions in the room. Otherwise, I'll continue Okay, one more there.
Just one more. How's the potential integration of Finland and Sweden into NATO? Would that be something that is quick because they've already done a lot of the interoperability that is necessary, or is that going to be a difficult process? And what impact might that have?
It's very nice news that we've heard from these two countries about the possibility that they would like to join NATO. And definitely it would strengthen the security of our region very, very much. And we see that Russia is quite nervous about this possibility, and they're threatening about some sort of decisions from their side. But I'm expecting their decision quite fast. And I think that looking at Ukraine, they're just understanding how important is NATO. And they were like not a part of NATO, but they were our allies, and have had quite good integration with their military. And I would say that accession of these two countries would be a process that wouldn't take too long, I would say. And we're very, very happy to receive them into NATO umbrella.
It's remarkable. It's happening at incredible speed, is it not? And I understand that the dates that they will announce, that Sweden and Finland will announce that they are applying, is the 17th of May. So that's less than a month from now. And to have gone from the Swedish government saying on the 16th of February in its national security strategy that Sweden will not be applying to not now apparently be planning an announcement together with Finland on the 17th of May. It's really incredible. But as you say, it's a sad time to have been proven right, but this is one of the effects of the war. I want to finish up with a couple of points on globalization. So for 30 years, and you're obviously a member of a generation that has known mostly this period of history. For 30 years, we've been constantly, our countries, not just the West, but around the world, have been constantly globalizing, and barriers have been broken down, trading barriers, I should say. And we thought that globalization could operate pretty smoothly, even when countries disagreed. And I think what's becoming obvious is that that's not the case. And globalization does not prevent wars, and it doesn't prevent countries even from squabbling, and that's exactly what we're seeing with China and Lithuania. What does that mean for a country like Lithuania, that's a free trading nation, as are most of our Western countries, in fact, all of our Western countries? What does that mean if this whole system that we've been building for 32 years, 31 years, isn't really fit for purpose anymore?
I think that the understanding is coming not only in the countries like Lithuania, but in the bigger countries as well, that to have secure supply chains is really important. To have supply chains where are participating just rule-based countries that are respecting the rules of the world. Western allies, I think that will be the direction that everybody will be heading to. And we had discussions during these meetings that the world is changing, and COVID showed that to have secure supply chains is really important. But at the same time, this war showed that secure supply chains is not only talking about the possibility to bring one good to another point, but at the same time to have very trustable partners to deal with. And I think Lithuania is also leading by example just like that, because we had many discussions with Russia in different fields, and our economy was turning around from east to west in many years. And I would say that this crisis, this war, is the last point of us to have wholly directed to the western parts of the world, states, the United States, European Union, and to be much more integrated with trustable partners, and to leave these unsecure markets to themselves.
So this completes your transformation from an economy focused mostly on eastwards to one focused
I
almost
would say
entirely
that every
westwards.
crisis is an opportunity as well. So not to stuck in the past, but to choose the better way to operate is really important.
And how do you encourage companies to trade with the sort of countries you consider safer or safe? Because you can't tell them what to do. How can you? How can you sort of steer them in that direction?
I think it's self-organizing already, because there are countries that are self-sanctioning. There's no sanctions for Russia in certain fields, but companies are withdrawing was from that market just because it's not trustable market. At the same time, what we're seeing in the countries like China, that also there are some unsaid sanctions for other companies, and companies are leaving China just because of that. So I think it's a process that will continue, and we have to be prepared. And I think that businesses understand that risk, that you're putting a lot of your money and a lot of energy to the markets that are not secure. You're just risking too much.
It was interesting. There's a global risk survey conducted by Willis Towers Watson, which is a global insurance broker, and it's always extremely interesting, but this year was even more interesting than usual. The percentage of companies, meaning executives, who are concerned about the risk of doing business in the Indo-Pac region, meaning effectively China, has risen to 95%, up from, I think, 63% 2 years ago. And so they are clearly paying attention to what's happening to companies, and the fact that companies can be punished for statements, not even actions, just statements by their home government. So what does that mean for companies if they just operating normally as commercial entities can be punished simply because of something their home government says? So as you say, they may not need a nudge from their home governments to start reducing their exposure to that market, in this case, China. I wanted to ask one more question, then we have to wrap up. But you said, since you mentioned sort of a westwards turn of Lithuania, one area where you are intrinsically connected with an eastern neighbor is the Lithuanian link going between imports, where they get their imports into the country through rail transport going through Lithuania. And how is that going at the moment? Because I know obviously Lithuania reduced that link when Belarus started the weaponization of migrants. What's happening at the moment?
It depends, because there are goods that are sanctioned, and you cannot just bring them to Russia because of the sanctions. And in our case, our railway revenues just were cut by half just because of that, because the goods are not going to that side because they are sanctioned, and not coming from their side as well, because there's sanctions for fertilizers and other things that they cannot bring to our side. But at the same time, there are some sanctions on the imports to Russia. So at this current period of time, it's just for the sanctioned good. But we're seeing that the imports to Russia, it is lower.
Sorry, I should have mentioned Russia as well.
Yeah, but we'll see, because the other sanctions also are on the table. So it might happen that the other goods will be sanctioned as well. So it would decrease their imports in a bigger amount.
So that means that Lithuanian railways have lost 50% of their revenues as a result of these sanctions. And that means that you have to somehow provide out of your budget.
Yeah, tomorrow,
provide support.
Not tomorrow, on Thursday, we'll have discussions in the parliament in Lithuania, and we will discuss the amendments to the budget. And one part of it is related to the sanctions and related to the critical infrastructure of Lithuania, and we have to give our railway company additional funds just because they need to support the quality of their infrastructure, and as well to implement the ever important projects, and they do not have enough funds to do that.
You have enough crises already, and I don't envy you, but congratulations on managing 3 or 4 major crises already, and let's hope there isn't a global economic recession coming our way, which I think is what you were all discussing at the IMF and the World Bank. You have been discussing this week. So thank you very much, and apologies for the questions I wasn't able to ask, but thank you for the excellent questions that the Minister was able to answer, and thank you for joining in the room and online, and I think it's safe to say we'll be following your work, and especially because Lithuania really is a case study in how to handle aggression below the threshold of war, and I hope it never has to handle aggression above the threshold of armed violence ever again. But in the meantime, you're doing great work below the threshold, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.